Good morning.
So sorry I missed you every time when we had an appointment.
That's not a problem, but I had so many questions that I wanted to ask you. But that's okay, that's okay. I will move on. We will have a chance, we will have some
At least I
stuff
could
later.
talk to Kevin last night.
Okay.
I explained to him, and, we discussed how this can run. And the idea is that every person on the podium will rotate out after 5 to 10 minutes.
Okay.
It will be replaced by someone else. Yeah, if there is somebody else.
So there is somebody else.
Yeah. One way of making sure that we get someone is that we have a Q&A session on mobile app. Do you have the mobile app?
I don't have that.
Yeah. So the audience can raise questions. Those that are then ranked within the columns, so the name is ranked. Design how many chairs we want to fill. That allows for maximum participation. Yes. The mobile app questions are not supposed to change topic because in discussed it by the same experts. If you raise a different topic from the other questions, then the experts in the podium may not be the right experts to decide whether that's not my topic. Anytime. And I'm choosing what is the most important suggestion, what is this about. This will inspire some ideas. Say something. Good. So you have good ideas. But summary means what are the most interesting statements or things that were raised, questions or answers. Okay, fantastic. So you can decide when to start. Then the conference system will evolve. You decide.
Page.
Page. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Good morning, and thank you very much for being here this early. I know that we are competing with other interesting discussions, topics, and even site visits. So what we would like to do today, this morning, is a kind of a sort of experiment in conversation, discussion about one particular issue, which is reducing uncertainty in sensor network. That's the main topic where we would like to discuss. And the rules are that there are not fixed panelists, but is rotating, and people that would like to contribute to the session and would like to express their ideas would have to come to the podium, would have to come to sit in the panels in some empty chairs, and talk about his opinions and comments, and then perhaps receives some questions and be able to answer these questions. You can use the Q&A, the phone app that is already designed for this particular discussion. It's called, Tanya, it's called Q&A.
Fishbowl Discussion.
Q&A Fishbowl session. That's the name of the app. So you can use that for your questions. And how the idea is the method of this fishbowl conversation is where this initially chairs will be arranged in a circle, and people will sit around it, and there will be the people rotating on these particular topics and stating their opinions, and then after 5 or 10 minutes, or if not receiving questions, then the people would rotate. That would be the idea to follow in this case. Again, the topic that we would like to discuss is reducing uncertainty in the sensor network, and this can be interpreted in very different ways depending on which side, if you're observational, if you're interested in just the measurements, or in the model, or in the interpretation. It could be a different a different way on how you can pose this question. So without more introduction, I would like to leave some of the panelists, that volunteer for the first initiating this discussion, and here to my right I have Tanya Pejic, that I would like her to introduce herself and discuss her views about these issues, and then to the gentleman in my left, I would like to have them introduce them and continue the discussion this way. We'll see how it goes. We need your participation. We need your involvement. So I hope in that way everything will work fine. Thank you very much. Tanya?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Dr. Tanya Page. I'm with the Australian NDC, and I work as a seismologist there. The NDC is hosted by the National Earthquake Alert Centre in Canberra, and I'm also currently working as a research seismologist in nuclear monitoring section within the same establishment. My current work involves looking into performance of the global association algorithm and the net visa algorithm, and comparing the two within Australia.
Hey, good morning, everybody. My name is Jim Matala. I'm PTS staff. I work in the IMS division as the chief of the engineering and development section, and under these responsibilities we work on various aspects of designing and installing IMS stations, and we also engage with the stations throughout their life cycle and work on the reestablishment and recapitalization of them, and then throughout all of these processes, you know, we are very keenly focused on the performance of the stations, and that they would meet all of the parameters within the requirements such that we have the good data quality So it's through this that we find this to be a really important topic. So look forward to engaging with everybody in the room about this. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. I'm Romano Plenteda, and I'm leading the unit responsible for the radionuclide facility design, installation, and certification. When facility means not only station, but also laboratories. And we take uncertainties very seriously, so we have a QA/QC program in which the laboratory is very much involved. So we may talk about this topic later on. Thank you.
Okay, then thank you very much for the introduction. I guess I will start. Jerry, could you initiate the discussion on your views on ideas on this uncertainty, what you understand, and what you would like to come up with the discussion for this, initiate this discussion on the topic?
Okay, so let me, a confession up front. This is the first Fishbowl discussion I've participated in, so I'm really hoping that however this discussion goes, that I envision that there should be a lot of audience participation in this. So we'll attempt, and I think also for the SnT series, this is perhaps the first Fishbowl discussion we've tried. So thank you for joining us all in this interesting experiment. So I think with that, you know, I guess one of the things I'd want to bring up immediately in this is, you know, looking at this consideration of uncertainty. I mean, where do you bound the problem and the discussion? And I think everybody would agree that reducing uncertainty or improving our confidence in the outputs of our network, this is fundamentally something that we all do in our jobs and understand the importance of this. But in terms of reducing the uncertainty, we could talk about this at the instrumental level. We could talk about this as the instrument as it goes into the integration of a larger system at a station. Then possibly you could look at this as when our colleagues in the data center are taking the results of these measurements that are done at the stations and then interpreting these through consideration of modeling that would be part of a transmission process between the source event and the sensor, and these could be over large distances. So I think there's many, many ways to look at this problem. So with this, I think feedback from my fellow panelists on maybe how they see each of these variations in this is an important perspective, because I don't know if there's a correct or a right answer to how one sees this, but I think at the fundamentals of what we do within the IMS, you know, we very much at the beginning focus on the instrumentation itself, and as Romano had mentioned a few minutes ago, in terms of making sure that the instrument is qualified and is operating properly within specifications. And for some of these involve doing various things in terms of calibrations and instrumentation blanks, and then we have laboratories that help us to verify these. So there's many, many ways in terms of how one would approach this. So I put these out as far as maybe some things that others will contribute to. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ray. Romano, would you like to continue on your views on what for you would be interesting to reduce the uncertainty and at what level? Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's important to discriminate uncertainties from the statistical component between this and the confidence of the data, if to be sure that there is no bias in the instrument. The data can have a very small uncertainties in terms of statistics, but may be very off from the expected outcome. So what is important, and this is what we are tackling in the full process from installation, certification, and also controlling that the instrument is performing and providing the correct outcome without any bias. We check independently the instruments, the different sensors. We have a QA/QC program in place where, for instance, we send samples from the station to the laboratory to have a benchmark in the review of the radionuclides which are in the samples. We are performing a proficiency test every year against the laboratory using as much as possible international traceable reference. And this is helping us to build confidence if there is any bias at the instruments level, and if there is any diversion from the instrument as it was certified within the lifetime of the station itself. This is how we control the bias. Then the uncertainty is inherent of the instrument itself. And we have a requirement during the certification where the overall uncertainties of the outcome of the station should meet a certain value. And so we make sure that the build-up of the propagation of the uncertainties is within the requirement. But what is very important that we build confidence that over time we can trust this instrument and the data can be then shared to the member states with high confidence.
Great. Thank you very much. Just to let the audience know, if you're interested, if you'd like to comment or be willing to participate in the panel sitting here, please come and join us. Otherwise, if there are not enough chairs, you would like to sit on the first front row, and then we will ask you to join us here in the front panel. So in the continuation, I would perhaps you can introduce yourself, and then I'll ask Tanya to share our views about uncertainty and continue with you later. Good. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Good morning. My name is Pierre Bourgoin. I'm atmospheric science officer within the IDC. So part of my role is to relate a detection, an RN detection, to a specific geographical area. Of course, it is important. You have a detection, you have to know where it comes from. And we do this using atmospheric transport modeling. And atmospheric transport modeling pretty much depends on numerical weather prediction, weather forecast, analysis, and forecast. So what is interesting with weather forecast is that it is an initial condition problem. So if you know perfectly your initial condition, you will be able to produce a perfect forecast, given that you have all the equation and so on. Of course, there are some limitations related to resolution, the computing power, etc. But the point is, it really depends on your initial conditions. So even if you have slight differences between two models in their initial condition, the result will be quite different. So for people involved in NWP, this concept of uncertainty is very important. And the way we try to solve this problem is by running many different models with only slightly different initial condition. We know the overall initial condition, and we perturb this initial condition. We change just a little bit here and there. And those differences will be enough to produce significant difference, let's say 2 days, 3 days, 1 week after. So by using many different models, we are able to quantify the uncertainty. In some situation, the predictability is very good. In some other situation, it is not. So, and it is important to have this information. So, because when we go back and try to identify the possible source location for detection, you have to be able to answer the question, how confident are you? And this confidence will come from what we call the ensemble prediction system. And what is also interesting to note is we never really know the true state of the atmosphere. It is an unknown. Different models, different centers will produce different solutions, even at the initial time. So it is a challenge, but at least if we can say it will be over this area or this area, that's a great help with a confidence level.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Pierre. Thanks a lot. This is the importance of the models, how to constrain the models. Yeah, it's another important issue in the whole answer. Yes.
So, you know, I think when one thinks about the intractably difficult problem of doing a test to prove this atmospheric modeling, I think of the complexities of how one would try to validate this in some kind of a physical experiment. And I think over the distances that are involved in this and all of the countless variables, I think there's not a clear way, at least in my mind, that this could be accomplished. So I think this ensemble approach is probably the next best approximation, given that it's very, very difficult to, I think, prove any one of these models over these long distances. And I'd ask Pierre to comment on this. At least this is my impression of the state of things.
Thank you very much for your comments. And Romano, you didn't have to leave. There are empty chairs that you can still contribute if you're. So thank you very much.
Yeah, let's get somebody to jump into the fishbowl that would like to contribute to the topics. This would be fantastic. So don't be scared. We even have water up here for you. All right.
I already introduced Tanya to tell us about her experience in Australia, so I don't want to have her meeting while Pete is sitting.
All right, and we have our first volunteer or victim. All right.
Good morning.
Close to them. All right. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Pete.
Good morning. My name is Pete Davis, and I manage about 1/3 of the USGS IRIS Global Seismographic Network, the university portion. And I would like to address a kind of narrow topic here regarding a narrow seismological topic. Really, from the start of the science of seismology, we've been able to measure our data more accurately in time than in amplitude. And this was fine for inferring a lot about the elastic properties of the Earth. But I think we've come a long way in standardization in the last 50 years, and the current generation of instruments that we have, the broadband fed-back instruments, we can characterize that response better than the current tolerances that are required in our operations. And I think we should exploit that fact as we move forward. I think that right now, I think it's 5%.
Yes.
I think, right. And I am confident, at least in our network, that we can characterize our response across the passband to within 1 to 2%. So going forward, then the people who use our data to actually model the Earth and estimate the magnitude of the sources would be able to proceed with confidence, knowing that the data are more accurate than that they had believed.
Great, excellent. Maybe. Thank you very much, Pete. But maybe that's applicable to other technologies as well. Well, maybe perhaps we would like to hear. We would like to hear your views as well. Mm-hmm. But I don't want to let Tanya go by without. No, but you don't have to leave.
Thank you, Sergio.
You don't have to leave. We'll receive some questions. Tanya,
I guess I can contribute to this topic in a slightly different way. So the way I see how we can improve uncertainties when it comes to an IMS network is, for example, I'll take my own personal experience here. We need to regularly maintain and service these stations and ensure that they're running properly as they're intended to. So, for example, I spent some time servicing an infrasound station, ISO 6 in Cocos Island. I don't know if many of you know where Cocos Island is. I can assure you it's an Australian territory, and a lot of Australians don't know where it is. It's in the Indian Ocean, and it's closer to Java than it is to Australia. It takes a couple of hours flight, I think about 7 hours flight from Perth, which is on Western Australian coast. And to put it into perspective, if you fly to Singapore in 7 hours. So upon reaching Cocos Island and servicing this station, you will find that a lot of the outlets that you have on your particular elements of the array, they're covered in sand. It's a very tiny island. It is exposed constantly to the elements, and the sand that clogs up these outlets will significantly reduce what we can actually measure and record. So with Geoscience Australia, we actually have a twice-yearly maintenance team that goes to various locations, and I can assure you that a lot of those in Australia are quite remote. Cocos Island is probably a bit of an extreme example, but we've got other stations. Probably the most known would be primary arrays, Alice Springs or Warramunga. They're smack in the middle of a desert, so someone needs to go there and maintain and service these stations regularly, and to make sure that they're running properly and that they're powered. Otherwise, who knows how they're performing, right? So that's one way to reduce uncertainty, I think, to make sure that the elements that are already there are running properly. Another thing that I have in mind is potentially monitoring the performance of the network as it is. So rather than, say, talking about introducing more stations or improving the coverage, the network actually performs remarkably well as it is. And we can maybe improve it in particular areas simply by monitoring what it does and providing regular feedback to CTBTO. So as I said at the start when I introduced myself, part of my work includes comparing the performance of the Global Association algorithm and the NetVisa algorithm on the IMS network within Australia. And at the moment, my opinion is that they're performing pretty much equally well. Visa may be marginally better. But by returning this feedback to the CTBTO and the people who take care of these stations, we can reduce uncertainties simply by saying, look, the network is already good. We can improve it by improving the software that we have running. Stephen Myers had a really good talk yesterday in a session on artificial intelligence where he showed how introducing 3D models and machine learning to emulate 3D models to predict the travel times can really help reduce uncertainties on the locations. So, for example, that's something that we can also take into account, and the network is already good, right? We just need to maybe improve some other things so to make sure that it's relatively on regular basis maintained, serviced, and that the software that we have can be improved. And that's definitely one way of reducing uncertainty, I think.
Excellent.
Thank you.
That's great. Very good points as well. So do we have more contributions? Thierry. Excellent. We have another volunteer. Kevin?
Yeah, hi. Thanks for the invite, Sergio. This is my first CTBTO SnT conference, and as a representative of the U.S. National Data Center, just want to say how much I appreciate the efforts of folks to address this topic and to take into account that the uncertainties ultimately feed into the customer base, the National Data Centers, the IDCs themselves, and the information that we can provide, and considerations all the way along from what you mentioned, sir, to the meteorology and other aspects of it play into that. And you brought up an interesting point in the fact that for those instances where we can exceed the capabilities or the mandates as to what the requirements are, how do we address those, or do we continue to push forward in those areas, or do we put additional efforts into other research areas, and how do we start to, there's thresholds and objectives. So you have a threshold of a minimum level of performance that you need, and there's an objective. If we've reached the threshold in specific areas, do we want to keep working in those specific areas, or do we want to take a look at those areas where we may not have reached a threshold yet or an objective? And how do we rate our priorities to address those situations? And that's one of the questions, I guess it's more of a question than it is a comment, is that as we move forward where we can exceed our thresholds and move towards objectives, how do we want to address that as a community? And from an NDC perspective, if I have a situation where I haven't quite reached a threshold, do I want somebody else pushing forward on an objective when I still have a shortage area here in one area? So that's more of a discussion topic than it is a question per se. And so I bring that up to the audience. I know certainly you have the app there. We can bring in questions or comments from the audience on this as well. Recommend we do that and potentially invite more people up.
Great. Excellent point. Thanks a lot, Kevin. Thanks a lot. I think that we could also include, I saw Thierry might be interested also in exchanging his views on, if you can, anywhere, and if you can introduce yourself first and then please.
Good morning, Thierry Héritier. I'm in CTBTO. I am in charge of the evaluation of the performance of the verification system. No, so I jump into I am an engineer. I'm not a scientist, but I was looking at the page about the uncertainty on the screen, and there is a definition. The uncertainty is a parameter that is associated to any kind of measurement. And yesterday, for instance, we heard Paul Richards talking about the future of seismology, doing full wave correlation down to the millisecond, looking for extremely small features in seismograms. And that is done with things that are sampled at 20 milliseconds, with an amplitude that is far from being controlled in most of the cases. How the hell you do that? It's doable, but it's complicated. Why not look forward to increasing the sampling frequency and try to do some metrology in the field of vibration? Sorry to use words that people don't like, but and in the line of what is done in CTPTO, I would like to mention something. I'm sorry if this is obvious to you, but as you know, from the 20th of May, the Bureau International of Weight and Measures have decided that the main physical constant that were affected by an uncertainty from the 20th of May have an accuracy which is absolutely perfect forever. Now, if we look to infrasound, for instance, which is a new discipline, so there is less cultural legacy in the field of infrasound, then people look at that, and to the surprise of at least us, was to find out that in the field of primary measurement, which are fundamental for metrology, there are no primary measurements in the field of vibration and acoustics, with the exception of the audio acoustics, for reasons that everybody can understand. So 20 kilohertz. Above that, no standard. Below that, no standard. Mm-hmm. Which is a very big problem, because the parameter that we have to associate to each measurement, namely each sample that we have in a waveform, for instance, we don't know how to define it. And what is happening now with the infrasound, I'm too close. What he's saying. It's okay?
Yep, you're good.
The infrasound is ranging from less than 20 hertz and down to almost DC. There are primary standards in acoustic down to, I think the reference microphone must be like 10 seconds, something like that. And then exchanging with the metrology community, it happens that this problem of sound measurement is very important in the developing of the society. For instance, all the vibration in big cities, the noise disturbance and things like that are not known. And by starting to discuss more in detail with the Bureau International of Metrology, then the engineering team of the PTS started to develop the idea of establishing primary standards. So what happened as a first step was that the main labs around the world dealing with infrasound started to compare their practices in doing metrology and things like that and agree on a way forward. that was presented to the Bureau International des Points et Mesures. I think it was in November, when the unanimous decision was taken to freeze the physical constant from the 20th of May this year was decided. CTBTO was invited, and our engineer came there and presented what is getting done in the infrasound. And as we speak now, this is formally established in the roadmap for establishing in the field of vibration and acoustics, so that infrasound standards are established with something that has been initiated because of the verification of CTBT. And I think this example is good because there is a chance that within few years, seismologists will be ashamed. They don't have primary standards, so they may eventually follow up the example of acoustics. And I wanted to say that because it's exactly the topic of this fishbowl. Sorry if I was a bit brutal.
Oh, that's excellent. That's an excellent point. In fact, you'll be proposing a standard to measure other vibrations then, we have not received any question yet on the Q&A. You're welcome to use again is the Q&A Fishbowl Discussion. That's the name of the app that if you want to write your questions, you can bring them up. Is there any other volunteer that would like to participate and contributing their views on this particular issue? If there is anybody, please sit down on the first row, and we will call up on them to participate. Otherwise, I also extend the invitation to the members of the panel if you want to add something that has not been discussed, or maybe reaffirm some of the views that have already been expressed, that find this interesting to continue on discussions on discussing these issues. We still have some time to we can discuss these ideas. Anybody? Mm-hmm. Kevin? Mm-hmm.
Also, I know we have folks with speakers, and not everybody has the app, so if there's individuals that have a question, please raise your hand. We have folks with microphones that come around the room as well for the group here.
I believe that I talked to some of the. Not sure. I cannot see whether the people are here. I talked to some of you yesterday, asking you whether you would be willing to participate. If you are one of those persons that I talked to and expressed his view that would participate, please join us and come up here. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I know it's difficult to compete with some other panels that are or presentations that are going on at this moment in different rooms. But I think we have a large enough audience. I cannot see too many the faces of the persons. But please, I would like to make a call. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. There we go. I can see some of you. If you're willing and not only to listen, but this is the opportunity to express your views about this topic, or some other that has a direct implication on the issues of uncertainty in the sensor network of the CTBTO. Tanya or gentlemen would like to have more discussion on this issue. Is an interesting. You think with what we have said here, what we have expressed here is enough. Maybe we are thinking of other options or issues that could come up. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure. Do we have a volunteer here? Do we have a volunteer? Fantastic. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes, congratulations. please introduce yourself, please, your name and
Hi,
place.
my name's Jesse Dimmick. I'm also at the Australian NDC with Tanya. I've been working on the problem of relative locations of repeatable events, such as North Korean tests. And I've got two things I'd like to talk about regarding uncertainties. And I guess the first is, in relative locations, one of the assumptions we make is consistency from year to year of the instruments that we're using. And I've had the situation where I've had to exclude IMS stations because temporarily the location was changed by several kilometers where the instruments were changed, and I wasn't comfortable using that station for the relative location. So I suppose one issue would be if you change the configuration of the networks too much over the course of years, if you're trying to compare events at a test site, then it becomes more difficult to do relative locations. The second issue would be with regards to infrasound stations. We have found that actually we've been able to use them as seismometers in Australia. We had a magnitude 5 event in Western Australia that wasn't detected by many stations, and I know there's been a lot of work recently on isolating infrasound stations so they don't detect seismic signals so well, but we found that they've actually been useful in reducing the uncertainty of event locations in cases where there's no seismometers nearby, and we found it actually quite useful to have infrasound station acting as a seismometer. And similarly, we also found that we're able to locate a meteorite event that passed through the atmosphere on a seismic array by treating that array as though it was an infrasound station. We're able to beam on that event and actually help constrain the location. So it's not necessarily all bad that the infrasound stations aren't completely isolated from seismic events, and similarly the seismic stations aren't completely isolated from the infrasound events. It's just a couple of points.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Lisa, one thing that got me ringing is one of the comments of Pete Davis on the issues of that we're reaching levels far beyond what is the restriction specifications, instrument specifications. Is that the case in infrasound as well? That we are measuring much better than the specification that was required, or we haven't gotten that to reach to that point in infrasound yet. Do you have any comment on that, or no? No.
Sorry, I couldn't hear what you were saying.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much.
That does raise an interesting topic, though, Sergio, from the standpoint of, I personally don't know as an NDC rep what the relationship is between the PTS and the respective NDCs to inform them of equipment changes and to work with them with respect, equipment or location changes and work with them with respect to how they figure that into their uncertainties and their calculations and ranges. Maybe there's a reference that the two Australians have with respect to what that interaction looks like and how it feeds into your concerns or questions of uncertainty. I know you mentioned it specifically in that the equipment changes out or locations change. And do you get advanced warning of that and coordination?
I don't really get advanced warning of that. More you find it when you're trying to locate something. You're often comparing it with something that was recorded years ago, and you don't get that advance notice.
Okay. And Jim, maybe you can actually talk to this. What's that architecture that looks like, the relationship between the NDCs and the PTS to give them, as the NDC customer, the type of certainty they need with respect to where those locations are or what instrument happens to be there?
So we have some questions coming through on the app, so thank you to those who have contributed. So I would like to chip in a little bit on what Jesse was saying. As he said, we do work together, but also by reading out a question that says, often decisions are made by combining pieces of information. Calculating combined uncertainties and accounting for correlations is hard. How and who is combining uncertainties and accounting for correlations between detection technologies? So I would invite more people to talk about this. This is probably an interesting question. Many perspectives, I can only speak for us, and going back to what Jesse said about his problems in calculating relative locations, when it comes to piecing information and calculating uncertainties and deciding, it's usually a big team of people who do that before any final decision is made. There's never just only one person involved. More often than not, one person is not qualified to comment on everything that comes through. So even within the Australian NDC, when we have an event, like what Jesse mentioned, like a big event, big for Australia, if you wish, of a magnitude 5, usually, there's a team that calculates the location, there's a different person who will estimate the uncertainty, someone else who will run a cross-correlator and have a look at how it compares to something else. We have a number of felt reports coming from people who have, say, experienced the event, right? Who are front and center and who are reporting on shaking and cracks, and so that information also needs to be incorporated in whatever decision is being made. So it's always a big team of people, but I'm sure maybe someone else can comment more on that.
Maybe it's a very interesting. Excuse me, it's a very interesting question. Is that it says that again, I'll repeat it. And perhaps some of the organization, some people from the PTS could help us in answering this question too. Often decisions are made by combining pieces of information. Calculating combined uncertainties and accounting for correlations is hard. How and who is combining uncertainties and accounting for correlations between detection technologies? Is any one of the, well, maybe on the panel, the rest of the panels, or maybe some of the audience of the PTS can help us on this question? Mm-hmm. Okay. There is another one that's pointed out by Tanya, that the treaty has specific limitations on the dimensions of the area to that OSI may be conducted. How useful is the location error ellipse for the decision where to go, and what can be done to make sure the error ellipse is not too large? Can any one of the panel or people, or is directly, I think it's towards some PTS member can also help us in answering this question. And maybe Tanya, you're a seismologist, you can also...
I can try and answer this briefly. So how useful is the location error ellipse for the decision on where to go, and what can be done to make sure that the error ellipse is not too large? So ensuring that the ellipse is not too large, it can be difficult because you need to be able to constrain the ellipse from pretty much every azimuth direction. If you have it elongated in one direction, it's a problem because you will have an ellipse that, for example, will be skinny and long, right? And that can potentially impact your decisions for the OSI. However, it is useful to calculate this ellipse because if you can, any information that you can collect to limit the area that you want to inspect is obviously useful, especially for the test sites or say, even like a big earthquake, if you need to ensure that it's a big earthquake, more often than not, maybe you'll have it in a mountainous region that is hard to reach, and you don't want to just blindly go somewhere and try and find an evidence of whatever it is that you're looking for. So the area ellipse in that sense is actually pretty useful. What we could do to ensure that it's not too large, again, is more often than not being aware of what the limitations and what the limitations of the network potentially are. So if you know that you will have an ellipse that is elongated in a certain direction, then you can potentially account for that.
Thanks, Tanya. I think Thierry has another comment on this.
Well, I jump because I'm supposed to evaluate how the system is performing. And this is typical the topic. That's why we are having this kind of conference. This question is not a scientific question. It's a question of the implementation of a treaty. Now, from a technical point of view, this area of 1,000 kilometers, in other words, the ellipse should be less than 1,000 kilometers, and the event should be inside the ellipse.
I think that's the point.
That's the bottom line.
I think that's the point.
And that should be the case all over the world. So with the size of the network, seismologists consider that sometimes it is difficult to do that. First of all, in the area where it is somehow likely that if anybody wished to do a nuclear test, he will not choose the middle of the ocean and 10 kilometers down to do that. So there is a degree of common sense, and if you apply that common sense, you'll find out that the area for which it is reasonably, humanly possible to think of a nuclear test from a technical point of view, in those areas you'll find out it is far less than 1,000 kilometers. Now, to cover all the potential cases, that's a problem for the diplomat that negotiated the treaty. And that problem is solved in a very simple manner, is that if there is a presumption of an explosion, then the state signatory in a process that is called consultation and clarification can come up with data that are called national technical means to demonstrate that actually the calculation done with the IMS data in that very specific case can be improved by adding national data made available to the organization of the treaty, and then obviously from a technical point of view, you will definitely reduce the ellipse far less to the 1,000 kilometers expected. Problem solved.
Thank you very much for the clarification, Thierry. It's in fact, this is a good point that we are here to talk about uncertainty, or trying to reduce the uncertainty in the sensor network, and we still have some more comments. There is probably Pierre. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I just want to briefly answer the question about combining pieces of information. We have a tool at CTBT called data fusion. It is not perfect, but what it does is you can overlap the ellipse associated with the SHI detection with the field of regard, the possible source area produced by the ATM. So that way you can combine two different pieces of information, each with its own uncertainty, and make a decision on how possible this area is related to a detection. So it was just a short comment that data fusion serves that purpose to some extent.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Pierre. This is a very important answer as well. Mm-hmm. Is there any other comment? Do you have a volunteer on the front row that would like to participate and join the panel with some other comments? Oh, it's only a minute. Thierry is telling me that we are on time, and I think I have to thank all the participants that have joined us here in the panel, and your presence as well has been very important. I hope this comes with a very good thoughts about what uncertainty means and how we can reduce this in the sensor network. So I would like to thank you. If anybody else would like to join with a final comment, please go ahead.
I think, Sergio, it's also important that if there's any ideas, obviously this was an experiment, but if there's any ideas of how we could improve this for both crowd participation and topic all areas, it'd be very welcome feedback to myself or Sergio or others around the room so that we could improve this format in the future.
Okay, great. I would like to ask you for a round of applause for yourselves, and thank you very much for your participation. Thank you very much.
It was very interesting. I like it.
one more is missing? Okay, I'll get it.
Yeah. No?
Yeah. So we don't, yeah. We don't see them and we can access them pretty easily.
Ok, merci. Et de toi, tu en as là-bas, ça? Herr Lautenau.
a bit messy.
Hi, Ginny.
Hey.
We thought to
Hi.
Yeah? Okay. Thank you, hon. We're just waiting for UYGs to arrive. Okay. So they're about 30. Great. I think we're okay. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for your patience as we are starting now. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, young global artists, good morning and welcome to the awards ceremony for the 2018-2019 Peace and Cooperation and CTBTO Global Scholar Art Campaign entitled For a Safer World, Let's Join Forces with the CTBTO. In August 2018, we launched this campaign on the occasion of the International Day Against Nuclear Test, IDANT, together with our Madrid-based partner, Peace and Cooperation, or Paz y Cooperación. We made a global call to children from around the world to submit a drawing or painting to increase public awareness of the vital goal of putting an end to nuclear explosions and working together for a safer world. When we launched the campaign, we also noted that the many scientific and civilian applications of the CTBTO's IMS data can inspire the younger generation to promote the work of the CTBTO and the importance of the CTBTO's global verification system. So the Global Scholar Art Campaign was organized into 3 categories: drawings for students aged 5 to 7. These students were invited to draw the most beautiful landscape they have ever seen, a picture evoking happiness and peace, which could be affected by nuclear testing. And then the second category was posters for students aged 8 to 12. Students were invited to draw a poster to raise awareness of the need to prevent any future nuclear tests, or alternatively, of the benefits of IMS data and possible contributions to scientific research and disaster risk reduction. The third category was for murals for students aged 13 to 17. And students were invited to draw a mural that depicts a world free from nuclear explosions, or again, the benefits of IMS data for possible contributions to scientific research and disaster risk reduction. So Paz y Cooperación and CTBTO promoted the campaign through school associations and networks, social network and social media, and through the kind assistance of our CTBTO youth group members worldwide who spread the word in their local schools throughout the past year. I want to mention and thank Elvira Sanchez for all her assistance with this campaign in Spain. Thank you, Elvira. You were here for the launch in August in Vienna, so thank you for all your help. So the judging process was carried out with 4 judges, including representatives from the CTBTO, PTS, the CTBTO Youth Group, Elvira Sanchez in Madrid, and Ambassador Arturo Pérez Martínez in Spain. We received over 1,000 amazing artworks from 25 countries, including Austria, Azerbaijan, Belarus, Bosnia-Herzegovina, Bulgaria, Cameroon, China, Cyprus, Colombia, Croatia, Dominican Republic, Egypt, Iran, Kenya, Kazakhstan, Latvia, Mexico, Montenegro, Namibia, New Zealand, Peru, Russia, Seychelles, Spain, and the United Kingdom. So a really impressive array of global artwork was received. I don't know if you've already visited the art exhibit, which is in the lounge area of this Festsaal. We have displayed over 39 art pieces in this exhibit for your pleasure. Additionally, on our CTBTO Flickr account, we've collated over 200 images from the artwork received into a virtual art exhibit, so artists and individuals all over the world can log on to the Flickr site and view this virtual exhibit, which I hope will be enjoyed by many. So if you were here on Monday for the opening ceremony of SnT, I don't know if you were as struck as I was about the power of art to express messages and elicit emotions in us without the need for words. That sand art performance was quite impressive. And I've been researching nuclear policy for a decade now, but I must admit working on this art campaign and project over the past year has really allowed me to view these issues in a different lens, in a different light. So I thank the children and all these artists for being so creative and inspirational. And you can see from all over the world, it allows you to sit back and look at these issues and through a fresh pair of optimistic eyes, I believe. To mark the achievement of these talented young artists from all over the world who have sent in their artwork, we're honored to have 3 key individuals congratulate the artists. They will say a few words and then hand over the awards to some of the children who traveled here to receive their awards. We have the honor to welcome CTBTO Executive Secretary Dr. Lizina Zerbo, Ambassador Senen Florenza from the Permanent Representative of Spain to the UN here in Vienna, and Mr. Joaquín Antuña, the Director of Paz y Cooperación. We are grateful particularly to the Spanish mission here in Vienna for introducing us to Paz y Cooperación and bringing this really creative project to us. And after the remarks from these gentlemen, we will also have the pleasure to hear from one of our talented artists that's traveled all the way from Namibia, Jana Swanepoel. So she will also tell us about her artwork. So first up, Dr. Lizina Zerbo, and you're welcome to either enjoy the lectern or from there. Thank you.
Morning. Thank you, Jenny, for a wonderful work and a wonderful introduction. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests and distinguished young artists. So first, let me say welcome to the CTBT Science and Technology Conference 219, to which your great work has been attached to help us get people to think more and differently about the way we can end nuclear testing once and for all. So first, let me begin by thanking the Permanent Mission of Spain and Ambassador Florenza for bringing us this project and introducing us to peace and cooperation. Thank you, Ambassador Florenza, for joining us today to mark this happy occasion. I would also like to particularly thank Joaquim Antuna, the Director of the Peace and Cooperation, for the fruitful and enthusiastic collaboration on this creative project. We are grateful to all your colleagues at PASI Cooperación and Elvira Sanchez in Madrid for all the hard work on this project since its inception and launch. I'm particularly delighted to see all the beautiful artworks submitted by young artists to this project, to this joint art campaign from over 25 countries. The incredible talent on display here in the special art exhibit showcases only 39 pieces from over 1,000 artworks received. If you haven't had the chance to already to enjoy the exhibit during the SnT conference week, I warmly invite you to do so today. And as Jenny mentioned, you can also check on Flickr and see how beautiful the young artists have done their work. There are some truly wonderful pieces on display. Our CTBTO website also only features, I think, 200 artworks for you to see. I'm especially pleased to welcome some of our young artists here today, all the way from Namibia, China, Azerbaijan, and Bosnia and Herzegovina. Thank you so much for coming. We are so happy to see you here today and wish to congratulate you on your achievement and talent. I'm convinced that art can help us build awareness for the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty and the need to end nuclear tests in new ways. Art appeals to us personally. It touches us on an emotional and aesthetic level. It can open new doors and let us see issues in a new light. Art requires no language and has no boundaries, just like science. Imagination and creativity allows artists to express powerful messages through the stroke of a brush. When I see these amazing artworks, I'm inspired by the creativity, talent, passion of this younger generation. I want to thank each and every artist who pick up a crayon or a paintbrush to help us spread the message of the beauty of our world free from nuclear testing. Rest assured that we will continue to celebrate your talent and incorporate your artworks in future projects and events. Your powerful art will continue to remind others about the need for a safer world free from nuclear tests as we prepare a world free from nuclear weapons. Thank you for sharing this message in such a creative and new light. Finally, I wish to invite all the young artists to join the CTBTO youth group to continue to promote the CTBT and spread the message of a need for a future without nuclear tests. We hope your involvement with this art campaign will encourage you to continue to join forces with the CTBTO for a safer world. Thank you so much, and congratulations once again to all the talented young artists who invested their time, their energy, their passion, and channeled their talent to share their artwork with us and the rest of the world. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Servo. Next up, we have the ambassador, SnT Florenza from Spain. Please, thank you.
Well, good morning to everybody. It is really an honor, and especially a pleasure, I would say, to be with all of you at this occasion, this morning, at this wonderful hall, which is particularly suited for this occasion, I would say, because we are working together for a very noble cause, which is peace and cooperation around the world. And we are participating, which is a splendid thing, in this Science and Technology Conference 2019 of the CTBTO. And in this occasion this morning, we are to grant the awards to young people, in fact, very young people, some of them, who have participated in this worldwide spirit to spread the hopes of humanity, of all people around the world, to ban nuclear tests and to work for peace. So I think it is a very imaginative and a very useful tool to spread the spirit of peace around the world. This is why I have to thank the Secretary General of the CTBTO, Dr. Lacina Zerbo. He himself combines these two things of being a scientist and being really engaged in the noble cause of peace and embodying in himself this kind of elan, I would say. And I would like very much to thank as well Senor Antuña, Joaquin Antuña, who has been working for so long in this project, and who at every time makes an exhibition of imagination and capacity of leadership, bringing people more and more into this endeavor to work for peace around the world. So this is why it's an honor for me as the permanent representative of Spain to be here today and share this occasion with the CTBTO and the Spanish NGO Peace and Cooperation, joining forces through this global scholar art campaign and raising awareness among the new generations of the threat of behind nuclear testing. So this is why I was saying at the outset, I would like to thank the CTBTO, its Executive Secretary, Dr. Lacina Zerbo, and mention and recognize the meaningful work led by Ms. Jenny Nielsen with all the CTBTO team, and appreciate your kind invitation to participate in this ceremony. But above all, I wish to express my recognition for all the works presented by you, schools and talented young students that have participated in this joint initiative of the CTBTO and Paz y Cooperación. I have to say, because it is important in this occasion, not just to appreciate the engagement of the young people, but to see what really is behind it, that from our side, Spain strongly supports the contributions to the work of the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty Organization. It is high time for us to work together to advance our common objective of a prompt entry into force of the treaty, Together, we can pave the way for entry into force of the treaty at the earliest possible time. This art campaign, through all your extraordinary drawings and the energy of the young generations, underlines the importance of the objectives of the objective of this organization to build a peaceful, secure, and sustainable world. The School Award, Peace and Cooperation, has embraced these elements and has transmitted them to you, the new generations, in an effective and educational way. This initiative has encouraged you, our youngest students, to make you best to protect our world, this time from a multilateral and international perspective. With these words, I extend my warmest congratulations to you, the participating young people and who have presented the awarded drawings, and to the CTBTO and Paz o Cooperación for offering us this beautiful art exhibit and for engaging more and more people in this noble cause of peace and cooperation. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Ambassador. And now we welcome Joaquín Antuña from Paz y Cooperación.
Hello to everybody, to authorities, to Secretary of CBTO with a magnificent shirt. Next time, I have told him I want his shirt for this presentation. And my splendid ambassador that has helped a lot. But the people that matter today are the students, are the young people, are the schools. We have built throughout these years a family of organizations that work to share common values with the United Nations. The United Nations is doing a great task, and of course, CTBTO is one of the aspects of having a safe planet without atomic essays and without the terror and the threat for the people. It has been difficult. Usually our campaigns are very positive campaigns, are yes campaigns. But this time it was a no campaign. And I have to thank all my teams, all my people in Madrid and in our international family as well, in many countries, to work so hard for this competition and to make a big step to try to have a better world. Sharing, we have to share values, we have to share vision, and we have to share action for the United Nations and to be a united planet. Of course, it's very difficult, but I am sure that all these clever boys and girls, teachers, fantastic teachers, that have, sorry for my broken English, and also I am a bit nervous with enthusiasm, because this is like getting married, you know? It's my, let us say, our wife is the United Nations, the CTBTO conference, and it has been wonderful to have winners here from Namibia, from Hong Kong, from Azerbaijan, also from Bosnia, my friends, my family from Bosnia and Herzegovina, these splendid people with which we are making a new step for a better world with a campaign. Next campaign will be for the future of children and youth, and it will be done with the backing of OSCE. So we remain here in Vienna for the last 3 years, and thanks to the backing of the Spanish representation, we have been working for UNOSA, the Organization for Outer Space, now for this organization, for these 1,200 heroes also that dream of a planet without terror, atomic terror, essays, and so on. I want to wish to thank also the delegation of Kazakhstan, because I understand that Kazakhstan is one of the most interested countries to try to avoid these essays. Well, you are the heroes, the ones that are here. You will get our trophies, and you have to understand that our family of peace, non-violence, common values, and people having an idea of a united world. Really, we are a family, the human race. Doesn't matter color, doesn't matter religion, doesn't matter faith. We are united. We have to be a family. And if people has done this fantastic building, why not to make a fantastic building of peace? It's possible. It's possible. We have to try to change. There are many organizations, many people, like SnT, like Spain, like Kazakhstan, like many other countries, trying to reach peace. But my homage today are for the winners of this competition and for all of children, families, because sometimes they present drawings where you have the whole family painting, because it's unbelievable, no? You have somebody 3 years old, and I think that father, grandfather, head master, and so on, take part in the drawing. So thank you very much to all of you for the wonderful work, and let us have a wish for peace. Many people speak about war. No, we have to be in love, to marry ourselves with peace. And that is what these winners have done, and all the people that have taken part in this competition. So, gracias, gracias, gracias. Muchas gracias.
Thank you, gentlemen, for those great words. We're now going to just list the winners, the top 12 winners of each category. You see the full list here, but I'm going to go through each artwork individually. From category 1, Anissa Mohammed Baghdadez, age 7, from Iran. Sazmin Kenesbai, age 7, from Kazakhstan. Álvaro Cobos Palacino, age 6, from Spain. Lung Hon Yin, age 4, from China. Category 2, posters for students aged 8 to 12. Plamena Krasilmirova Krasteva, age 11, from Bulgaria. Eileen Najafi, age 11, from Iran. Petya Dimitrova, age 8, from Bulgaria. Mahmoud Mustafa Negem, age 10, from Egypt. And now category 3, which was age 13 to 17. We have Ermina Kolagiru, age 16, from Cyprus. And now we have 3 students working jointly from Montenegro, Tara Bozovic, Miljoka Simečić, excuse my pronunciation, Mladen Simečić from Montenegro. And this group we have here in the audience as well. We have a group from Bosnia and Herzegovina, and excuse my pronunciations of all your beautiful names. Jasmina, I might stick to your first name. Jasmina, Edita, Laila, Danish, Adna, Rizaj, Melika, Enisa. Thank you so much. And another young student who's here from Namibia, Jana Svanepoel, age 16. And before we call up our students to receive their awards, Jana has kindly agreed to tell us a little bit about her artwork. So Jana, would you please come up and share a few words about your art piece that you see displayed?
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. All protocol observed. I'm extremely honored to be here today and to represent my school, St. Paul's College, and my beautiful country, Namibia. I decided to use this opportunity to give you a little bit of an explanation of the meaning behind my art. After doing a thorough investigation of what the CTBTO is, I found that they not only work toward the ban of nuclear tests, but contribute to alerting us about dangerous seismic activity with the IMS data as well. I was immediately inspired to make an artwork that communicates our world's gratitude toward the CTBTO. I decided to paint the embodiment of Earth's nature, Mother Nature, along with several silhouetted figures that represent all people around the world, embracing and praising the CTBTO, which takes the form of an orb. The orb is adorned with several international monitoring systems equipment, proudly displays the CTBTO name and logo. And I made the orb blue because I feel that the color signifies peace and serenity, as well as trust and security, which are all feelings that the CTBTO invokes in its supporters. Thank you.
Thank you, Jana, for sharing those words about your beautiful artwork. I will now ask our 3 gentlemen to come to the front and help us award the prizes to all the students. And first up, I'll have Dr. Zerbel handing the certificate and trophy to Jana, since you're up here. Please come forward. Thank you so much. Please. Thank you so much. Dr. Zerbel is presenting the trophy that Paz en Cooperación has created for this. The Nelson Mandela Trophy is what Paz en Cooperación created. And our certificate. Thank you, Jana, for coming from Namibia all this way. Yes. And if they could stick around, we can take a photo. Oh. And next, I'll call in our young artist from Hong Kong, China, Lun Hon Ying. I know you're here. Please come up, and Ambassador Florenza will award you the prize. Oh, I was supposed to. And just to remind you, the artwork displayed on the screen is what this fine boy has created. Amazing, right? Thank you. Thank you. And now I'm going to call it our group from Bosnia-Herzegovina. I know we have a large group here, and Joaquin Antuña will present them with their prize. And just to remind you again, their artwork is displayed on the screen now. Please come up. Thank you. Sí, gracias. We've got Jasmina. Jasmina, thank you. Edita, Laila, Danish, Adna, Riza, Melika, Neja, Anissa. Yeah? Can they identify those? Yeah, if you hand them out. If Joaquin wants to hand them. Next it's and then we'll come up. Lots of pictures. Oh, that's sweet. Big group. Maybe the teacher can have them. Okay. So what's the teacher? The teacher is down there taking the photo. Okay. Bravo, thank you so much. And we also have a young artist here today from Azerbaijan. We have Gulay Mamadsada. I'll display the art here above. Gulay. So sweet. So gentle. Thank you, Gulay. And I will invite Stanica Anjic from the Permanent Mission of Montenegro to accept the award for 3 artists from Montenegro who sadly could not join us in person today. It was Tara Miljoka Mljaden. Thank you, Stanica, for accepting the award.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.
Congratulations to all you wonderful artists. You've really inspired us. And rest assured, we will continue to use this artwork in our public information products and our projects to promote a world without nuclear testing. You've really brought a new light to us and motivated us to use these masterpieces in our campaigns, and we really appreciate every submission. And it was a really difficult selection process, as you can imagine. And before you leave the Hofburg today, please do visit our exhibit that's on display in the lounge area of the Festsaal. And again, we just want to thank you all warmly for coming today, and thank the artists again for their creativity and their passion, which we will continue to promote. Thank you so much to our speakers today, and please continue to enjoy the art, enjoy the virtual gallery, and thank you so much for coming.
The winners with us to take a picture. All the winners. Yes.
1, 2, 3. Seems to work now. Good morning and welcome to this panel discussion entitled Civil Applications Towards Monitoring Near-Earth Objects Impacting the Atmosphere. And this is a slightly different subject from other topics addressed here at this SnT meeting, but I hope you find it also interesting. And I would start by introducing the panelists here. So here we have Romana Koffler to the left, and she is a representative of the United Nations Office for Outer Space Affairs, so also located here in Vienna. And since many years, she has been the interface to planetary defense measures and to near-Earth objects at the Office for Outer Space Affairs. Then we have Peter Brown. He's a faculty member of the University of Western Ontario in Canada. And for many years, he has worked on meteors and fireballs, both with optical radar and other means. So he is certainly a top expert in this field. And then we have Esther Drollshagen here. She's a PhD student at the University of Oldenburg, and she is working on a system to detect fireballs and provide information in near real time. So we will hear more about this in the coming minutes. And as the subject is a bit different and not all might be aware of what it's really about, we thought it would be useful to give some introduction on the subject, so to have a little bit more information than is usual. But before we do this, I would also like to introduce myself. So my name is Gerhard Drollshagen. I've worked for 30 years at the European Space Agency, and now I'm still supporting ESA and also the University of Oldenburg in the area of meteors, fireballs, and also near-Earth objects. And you might have seen in the list there was the name Detlef Koschny foreseen as a moderator. But unfortunately, he had some very urgent matters in connection with a Mars lander camera where he is responsible for. Therefore, he could not come today. So that means for me, I have to put on two hats simultaneously as a moderator and participant of this panel. I mean, when we talk about near-Earth objects, there are three main areas of interest. First of all, there is a scientific interest. I mean, these objects impacting Earth are messengers from space, and you can learn a lot about their origin and maybe even about the origin of Earth and the solar system. But then there is a public interest, so they always cause public attention. If you see a fireball, and this public attention can be either type of excitement or of concern if you start to worry what could happen. And finally, there is also the risk aspect. If the objects get bigger and impact Earth, there is really a risk to assets on the ground and also to people. And today we will mainly address the two subjects, public attention and the risk aspects of near-Earth objects that do hit Earth. And it's also worth mentioning that this field of planetary defense and fireballs and near-Earth objects is a very international activity. So it's a very open activity, and it's coordinated worldwide. I mean, these effects that you might have are global. No one is to blame, and an impact can occur anywhere on Earth. So it's very important, and I would say it works very well, that you have a good and close international collaboration in this field. And that's why we have the United Nations closely involved. And I would like to give first the floor to Romana Koffler to present activities of UN-USA going on in this field of near-Earth objects and planetary defense. I mean, before we start, I would like to remind you we will have initially some relative brief presentations to introduce the subject, and then we should spend most of the time to have discussions. So we are ready to take questions either via the app online. You can already start forwarding questions right now if you want to do so, or you can wait with it until you heard the introduction. And we will also have an opportunity for those people here in the audience to raise their questions using a microphone later. So please, Romana, I would like to invite you to explain the connection between UN-USA and planetary defense.
And let me know when my time is up. Yeah, thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. I'm very pleased to be here on behalf of the Office for Outer Space Affairs. I think this is actually the first time we have this connection also at SnT to address this esteemed community of scientists that work with CTBTO. The angle of my presentation will be more on a policy aspect. I would like to just give you an overview of what has been happening within the United Nations and the Office for Outer Space Affairs in the area of international collaboration in sharing information on near-Earth objects. So, our office is a very small office. Like CTBTO, we're actually situated on the same floor in the building of Vienna International Center, and this is our mandate. So we are serving as a platform for international cooperation in the peaceful uses of outer space. A brief overview of our work. So we serve as a secretariat to a very unique committee on the peaceful uses of outer space, which is the only committee in the UN system that really deals with peaceful uses of outer space and international collaboration in that. It has 92 member states, and it has 2 subcommittees, scientific and technical subcommittee and a legal subcommittee. So we have also a very dedicated program that comprises more scientists, and they work with member states, particularly developing countries. It's called Program on Space Applications, in organizing workshops and training how to use space applications for sustainable development goals, so for practical socioeconomic goals. We also discharge a very important function on behalf of the UN Secretary General, and this is in accordance with the treaties. We keep on our website the UN register of all the objects launched into outer space. So according to the treaties, member states are obliged to register an object launched, and this is a very important transparency and confidence building measure. Now, when we make links with the NEO community, we serve as the secretary to the Space Mission Planning Advisory Group, and we cooperate with International Asteroid Warning Network. Now, these are 2 entities that came into being in 2014, so fairly recent, and I will introduce the scope of work and their membership. But they came into being as a result of quite a long process of negotiations within the Committee on the Peaceful Uses for Outer Space in terms of how to strengthen collaboration in area of near-Earth objects. And I will also introduce linkages we have with UN SPIDER and its network. This is a program for disaster risk reduction. And I know some panels were already been held on this topic earlier this week. So the 3 main pillars of our work is capacity builder. So we work with member states, developing countries, and trying to bring the benefits of space to everyone, everywhere. We serve as global facilitator in negotiating the rules and in negotiating the collaboration within the committee. And we're also a gateway to space in the United Nations system. So it's a very unique, very small organization. It comprises around 30 staff members, but we have quite a unique mandate within the UN system. So in terms of the connections with planetary defense, I just wanted to give you a bit of an overview. So obviously member states, there was a need to start negotiating certain rules of conduct in case a real threat is discovered. In 1999 in Vienna, there was the third Unispace conference on exploration and peaceful use of outer space, and it came out with the Vienna Declaration. In this declaration, there were 33 recommendations, and one of the recommendations was also to strengthen the coordination in this area, in nearest objects, information sharing. As a result, we had an action team established within the Committee on the Peaceful Uses of Outer Space, and this action team put forward recommendations that then led to the establishment of Space Mission Planning Advisory Group and International Asteroid Warning Network. So these are the two entities. As I said, they're not UN entities, but they work with our office, and they report to the committee, Scientific and Technical Subcommittee, on the progress of their work. As you can see, IOAN is more of a virtual network comprising very different entities. For example, these are the signatories to IOAN's statement of intent. You can see from like private astronomers, individual astronomers, to national space agencies that have the capability to observe asteroids. So the work includes search and characterization of NEOs, emergency management, and also communication with media. Now, same page, we have Gerhard Drosshagen here. He's the chairman of Space Mission Planning Advisory Group. Same page is chaired by European Space Agency, while IOAN is coordinated by NASA. Now, same page has a very specific mandate, terms of reference. You can see it's responsible for laying out a framework, timeline, and options for initiating and executing a space mission in case there would be a real threat. So it looks at mitigation options and also does case studies. Now, same page comprises more of national space agencies, also European Space Agency, basically with entities that are capable of executing a possible mitigation campaign. Here are 11 lists of activities identified by same page in the area of planetary defense. It's just for your reference and further information. So where are we at the moment? These two entities are in place. Member states of the Committee on the Peaceful Uses of Outer Space are regularly briefed on their work. And in case of a real threat, this would be sort of an information flow between IOAN, same page, and then it would flow through United Nations Office for Outer Space Affairs to the government delegates of the committee, and eventually also to the all United Nations member states. The areas of cooperation that we have with IOAN and same page are basically in communicating, in disseminating of the NEO-related information, but also in capacity building. Because our mandate is tailored particularly towards developing countries, and those are to the countries that don't have the capabilities in the area, for example, of planetary defense. We try to work with them and make sure that they recognize IOAN and same page as the two entities that were established under the umbrella of the United Nations and can also be used as a trustful source of information in case of a real threat. This is our UN SPIDER program, the program for disaster management, and it works similar like CTBTO, so it has a support of regional support offices globally, our sort of work in the pipeline would be to use these regional support offices to also inform them and link them to the IOAN and same page activities and to contribute to planetary defense efforts. So this is the SPIDER mission. It's to ensure that all countries have access and develop the capacity to use all types of space-based information to support full disaster management cycle. Why the linkages? For example, you all probably know that we have 3 agendas global agendas, the 2030 Agenda, the SnT framework, and the Paris Agreement on climate change. Now, SnT framework, for example, does not include a reference to near-Earth object as a possible threat. So we would like to really sensitize also this part of the disaster management community to include near-Earth objects or space weather, for example, on their agendas, but also when they are developing the global early warning networks, like, for example, IMO, so that they have also the information on near-Earth objects and space weather there. Now, these are some of the existing mechanisms that the UN Spider is working with, and as I said, our goal is really to connect this part of the disaster management community to the planetary defense community as well. The other important aspect when we come to planetary defense and mitigation options is also the legal aspect. Now, the Committee on the Peaceful Uses of Outer Space has been tasked when it first came into being in the late 50s, early 60s, to develop a set of core treaties and principles that regulate conduct, code of conduct in outer space. The most important one is the Outer Space Treaty that came into being in 1967. The same page also established a legal working group to basically look at what is the current international regime and what is the basis for any future planetary defense mitigation actions, and whether such a basis exists in the current international legal regime. As I said, the information flow has been established between SamePage and IOAN. They report on their activities regularly to our scientific and technical subcommittee. This subcommittee also meets in Vienna for 2 weeks. Then it's followed by the legal subcommittee, and then the main committee just finished the meeting on 21st of June. They both report to the main committee. We maintain an information database. So if you go to our webpage at unusa.org, you will see that we link to SamePage activities, we link to IOAN activities, and we also have quite a new international day proclaimed by General Assembly, International Asteroid Day, aimed in particular to raise awareness among public about this issue and about the options that are there in case there would be a real threat of impact to Earth. So it's 30th June, in a couple of days. Now, with CTBTO, we're very pleased that this interagency cooperation is ongoing, and we have here Esther Drorshagen, who will present the project NEMO. It's about near real-time monitoring system that proved very useful for strengthening cooperation, and United Nations Office for Outer Space Affairs looked at this project and discussed with our partners at CTBTO of how we can build on this and actually explore the sharing of real-time infrasound data for this purpose, for monitoring and observation. Now, there are 2 other upcoming events that I would like to finish my presentation with. Since this is a technical scientific community, there's also a very scientific sort of foundation based in Erice, Sicily, that organizes dedicated schools, and this will be one planned for next year. More information will be available on our webpage at unusa.org. So it's scheduled for 20 to 24 April. It will be a very interdisciplinary school on near-Earth objects and planetary defense. And then following the last PDC, just held at the end of April, beginning of May in Washington, we have also put forward a bid to host the next PDC Planetary Defense Conference, which is a biennial conference in Vienna. And this is, so it will be held at the Vienna International Center. These are the dates already, in case somebody is interested, and further information will also be displayed on our webpage. And with that, as I said, I just wanted to really set the context, and we will then be open for further discussion following the presentations of my colleagues. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Romana. We now will present a little bit more scientific on technical background information very briefly on what exactly we are talking about. So I will give briefly, very briefly, some information about the objects that do impact Earth. I guess most of you have already seen one of these meteors which happen every clear night, and they are quite frequent. So what you see here is a typical meteor, a Perseid in this case. So in the middle of August, you have specifically many of these meteors. And actually, the object that caused this type of meteor could be very small. It might just be the size of a rice corn or of a pea, and then it causes a trail bright enough that you can see it with your naked eye, like we have here. So these very small objects happen all the time. Then sometimes a bigger object does impact Earth. And what you see here is a picture from a video of the Chelyabinsk event. And you can see here it happened on the 15th of February 2013. So this was the most recent real large event, which also caused some damage. And there was a 20-meter stony asteroid hitting Chelyabinsk in Russia. And this has a total impact energy in the order of 500 kiloton TNT equivalent. So quite a sizable object. And at this size, they do not happen that often. But even bigger events can impact. So here is a picture of this famous meteor crater in Arizona, where a 50-meter iron asteroid impacted roughly 50,000 years ago, and causing a crater about 1.2 kilometers wide, 200 meters deep right now. And the estimated impact energy was between 10 and 20 megatons. So quite a large event. And fortunately, such events do not happen that frequently, but they can happen at any time. And there are various ways of monitoring and detecting these type of objects. So those that happen frequently, more or less every day, these meteors and fireballs, if they get a little bit brighter, those you can watch with cameras, with video cameras, with photography, also with your naked eye, and also with radar. If the objects are real big, like 20 meters or 50 meters or even bigger, you can see them with telescopes from the ground, with optical telescopes, and one could see them hopefully coming before they impact, or even if they pass close by Earth. So there are various search strategies, and the most, let's say, successful are operated by the United States. There are telescopes on Hawaii and in Arizona, which do regular surveys, and more of those activities are planned. So the one idea is to survey the complete visible sky once every night to see if there is an object coming that could actually impact Earth. So the small ones one can see from the ground by fireball monitors, the real large ones by telescopes already in space. But there is some region in between, objects of some tenths of centimeters to a few meters, and they are very difficult to detect because they are not frequent enough to be seen with local fireball networks, and they are also too small still to be seen by telescopes out there in space. So and this is a regime which is of specific interest and where there is a large uncertainty. So here one needs some means that provides a global coverage, being able to detect half a meter, several meter size objects. So infrasound sensors is one possibility. There are others, optical sensors from space, and also recently it was found that lightning detectors can also observe those objects. But in this size range, some tens of centimeters to a few meters, there is still a large uncertainty. And altogether, we know about 50 tons of material rain down on Earth every day. That's a statistical average, 50 tons every day. And with this information, I would like to hand over to Peter Brown to give some more information on the NEO population and what we know about it.
Thanks, Gerhard. So I'm going to build a little bit on what Gerhard was talking about, just covering a few brief background bits of information. Talking a little bit about near-Earth objects. We've already been talking about them. They're in the name of the title, but what exactly are these? So these are basically any small object in the solar system that gets relatively close to the Earth, or it has an orbit that is relatively close to the Earth. And they're of interest because on time scales of centuries, their orbits can be changed enough that they could actually be Earth impacting. So from the standpoint of a hazard or a planetary defense concern, the near-Earth asteroids or near-Earth objects are things we want to be worried about. You also hear the term meteoroid. These really are the smaller objects, meter sizes and smaller, the dust particles as Gerhard was talking about. And once you're above a few meters in size, we start talking more generically about asteroids. The object coming into the atmosphere produces light, heat, sound, shock, ionization. That phenomena is generically, we term a meteor, and a really bright meteor, a fireball or bolide or airburst. We use those terms pretty much interchangeably, and certainly for our discussion today, we're really dealing with those objects that are typically a meter in size and larger. The smaller ones are interesting, but probably not from a global monitoring perspective. So what happens when one of these objects hits the atmosphere? Well, of course, it's moving much faster than the speed of sound. There's a shock wave that's produced. This shock wave moves outward from the point of impact as a sort of a line source explosion. The object itself may also sort of detonate or fragment and produce a spherical explosion. So you often get a superposition of these two types of shocks. And that sound can then travel long distances in the atmosphere, either through stratospheric jets in the atmosphere or even thermospherically, be detected by microphones, in particular infrasound microphones, or by seismic instruments. If the airwave couples to the ground, or if it's big enough, like Chelyabinsk, it can actually excite some of the oscillation modes at the surface of the Earth, and those seismic waves can then be detected. So in space, the telescopic surveys have discovered many of these objects. In fact, to date, about 20,000 of these near-Earth objects are known. This chart's just showing the cumulative number of detections as a function of discovery date. The good news is, the really big ones that we'd be most concerned about, the kilometer-sized objects, we think about 95% of those have been found. So there's only a small number of those that we have not detected. None of them are on a collision course with the Earth for the next 100 years. That's very, very good news. So there's about 1,000 of those known. But of course, as you go to smaller sizes, there are many, many more. So objects like Chelyabinsk, 20 meters in size, we think there's something like 10 million of those that are near-Earth objects in near-Earth space. And so, of course, it's much harder to find those. They're smaller, and there's a lot more of them. Yet those are the things we would have to worry about on sort of century time scales as sort of the biggest things that might impact the Earth. So this is just a graph showing roughly over time how our knowledge of airwaves from bolides has changed, just a reference to the number of fireballs that have produced infrasound. And so the bars are showing that you can see as a function of time years that starting in 1996, as the IMS started to become developed, we start to see an increase in the number of actual fireballs being detected infrasonically with infrasound. And in the last few years, we see roughly 1 every 2 weeks is there a fireball that's detected infrasonically, often by the IMS, but often perhaps other ways. And certainly the IMS, particularly the infrasound component of the IMS, probably detects fireball infrasound on the order of once or twice per week. So you can see this data set is growing. It's a very effective way of detecting fireballs. And finally, of course, the natural question is, how often do these things actually hit the Earth? So what I'm showing here is the size of the object on the x-axis, or its energy equivalently in the bottom part of the x-axis, as a function of the number of such objects that hit the Earth every year. So at the 1 meter size scale, a 1 meter sized object hits the Earth about once every 2 weeks globally. A 5 meter sized object is about the biggest thing the Earth encounters annually. A 5 meter sized object has an impact energy somewhere in the 5 to 10 kilotons, a detector to understand these. So I think with that, I'll turn it over to our next speaker.
Thank you, Peter. So now we will hear about an ongoing project to develop a near real-time monitoring system of bright fireballs given by Esther Drollshagen.
Hi, first I would like to thank the organizers for the invitation, and now I would like to start to give you a feeling for the impact masses that hit our Earth every day. So we have computed a daily impacting mass of about 54 tons of material every day. But to get a feeling, maybe you can imagine if we're talking about more than 70 cows that reach our Earth every day. And now I would like to introduce a little bit the system, so our project where we're working on. It's a joint project between our university and the ESA, and together with my colleague Theresa Ott, we are building up a monitoring system for bright fireballs. We hope that it will work in near real time and worldwide, so if a fireball occurs everywhere, we would like to be informed about this. And the current situation is as follows, that there was a fireball and it's possible that it causes a lot of public attention. This depends on the time when the fireball happens, but also on the location where it happens. If it's over the sea and nobody sees it, then we are not informed as fast about this fireball because our alert system is mainly based on social media, on Twitter. So there can be a lot of different information about this fireball in different data sources, not only on social media, but also on, as already mentioned, on fireball networks. They can be based on video observations, they can be detected by radar, but also on more, on a first glance, maybe unconventional data sources. For example, the infrasound, by lightning mappers, by satellite data. And there are a lot of different information sources for this fireball. And with our project, which we call NEMO, we try to combine as much information as possible about all fireball sightings. So I think the best way to talk about the project is to give you one example about one NEMO event. And this is the way we are normally informed about one fireball. We receive a Twitter alert. So here's a tweet. There was a fireball sighting, and then we receive a lot of different texters. Often they are talking about aliens, UFOs, but in this case they are friendly aliens. They just arrived for the World Cup. And then we receive often videos about the event also with our Twitter alert system. And here you can see that it really was a fireball. We see it was a bright fireball, so we are interested in this event. Here you can see how really bright it is during the peak brightness. And this event happened over Russia, so we were very happy. There are a lot of different videos of different images because they all have these dash cams on their cars. And yeah, we were receiving a lot of different alerts from mainly Twitter. And here we were also informed by Twitter that this fireball was detected by the infrasound stations of the IMS. So we were asking for the data and started to analyze it. And because this asteroid was really a huge one, we could identify a signal of this fireball in 10 infrasound stations. And with this, it's possible to compute an energy of the impacting asteroid and its size. And this is what people in most cases want to know. I also want to know how large was the asteroid that hit our Earth last week, for example. So we could say for this fireball, the impacting asteroid has a diameter of about 4 meters, based on this infrasound data. then we are receiving more and more alerts, not only from our Twitter alert system, but we are also using the Google alert system, for example. And from this information system, we're receiving a lot of newspaper articles. Also, if they are available online, these journalists are doing a great job. They are very fast. So we receive more and more information about it. Here's one example. This took some days, but there was a collaboration of different researchers from different countries who started meteorite finding searches. And in the end, they came up with more than 5 kilograms of material from this asteroid. And yeah, so we knew that these were no aliens. And it was a natural source, so really an asteroid from our solar system. Yeah, and with this, I would like to thank you.
Thank you, Esther. I think after these introductory remarks and some background information, we can now start the discussion. And we have already received a few questions online. And perhaps I start with a few of those before we give the others in the audience a chance. If I just look at the top of the list with questions, I mean, one question asked several times is, planetary defense implies a capability to react to a threat. What capabilities currently exist to mitigate a threat? Maybe that's a question I can try to answer, because it's really in the domain of these two groups mentioned by Romana, these international groups, the I1 and the same page, Space Mission Planning Advisory Group. So first of all, what one can do depends on the specific situation. So on the size of the object and how much time does one have to react. And it was one of the first results of those groups when they discussed it to define more or less a threshold when you would try perhaps to do a mitigation and a threshold in size. And the result is if the object is bigger than 50 meters, and an impact could occur within the next 50 years, then one would consider to perform a mitigation mission, a deflection mission in space. If the object is smaller than these 50 meters, one would likely either just give a warning to people or initiate an evacuation. This would be left to the national civil protection agencies and to the disaster management people. If the object is bigger than 50 meters, one would look at options to deflect it. It doesn't mean that one sees a possibility to do it. I mean, potential options are still being analyzed, and basically there are two classes. One is called, let's say, impulsive methods. So this you could do by hitting an asteroid as hard as you can with a satellite to give it a small push, and then if you have enough time, it will miss Earth rather than impacting it. Other options are so-called slow push methods, where you fly there and you irradiate the asteroid with a laser beam or with an ion beam, or you just fly next to it with a large spacecraft, and by the gravitational pull, you can slowly move it out of its way. Here, I mean, the critical parameter is the time you have to do this. In practice, it has not yet been demonstrated, but one of these methods should work, and in principle, they should be feasible. So it will depend on the specific situation, but what one would do is either using an impulsive method if you have less time available. This could also be a nuclear explosion at or close to the surface of such an asteroid, with the aim again to deflect it, not to disrupt it, because that is not desirable. So these methods should be possible, but they still have to be demonstrated. I hope this answers one of these questions. And if I look at this list, one very popular question seems to be, does Outer Space Affairs Department develop strategies for interaction with aliens. We heard already in the NEMO system, sometimes alerts are attributed to aliens. So I would like to ask Romana this question, whether it's really serious or not. Please, Romana.
Yes, indeed, that is a very popular question, and actually it would be kind of cool to have such a mandate. But I would have to disappoint our colleague who posted this question, because the mandate that our Office for Outer Space Affairs has comes from member states, United Nations member states, from the General Assembly. And it was actually true that in the 60s, the United Nations discussed this issue, who would be, and it's still a pertinent question, who would be the first point of contact, right? Should there be a contact from outer space? But as I said, this has not been decided, and our office unfortunately does not have, or fortunately, I'm not sure, such a mandate to deal with extraterrestrial life or any contact.
Thank you. Another question, maybe this is something that Peter Brown could answer. So when estimating an energy or a diameter from infrasound, how can you assess the reliability via a confidence interval, for instance, of these data?
Yeah, so with infrasound, we often can make some estimate of the source energy. One of the complications is the atmosphere, of course, is filtering the original source function, the original shock wave. So it's a very, very messy system where you have a poorly defined source that's the bolide or the asteroid is breaking up, fragmenting, producing a cylindrical shock, a spherical shock. And then at some distance, often hundreds or thousands of kilometers, you're detecting an airwave that's undergone propagation effects, dispersion, and so on. So historically, what people have done in the field is they make use of empirical relations, usually between period and source yield, but people have also used amplitude and source yield. There have been some studies that have done this using, for instance, the energies produced on the JPL Center for Near-Earth Objects Science webpage as sort of ground truth, and then use that data to try to infer these empirical relations. And then the confidence intervals would simply come out from the fits to these empirical fits, the prediction and confidence intervals. So it's not really robust because the model, our understanding of this very nonlinear process is not very complete. We don't have complete understanding of the atmosphere and what it's doing. And so you're left with sort of these empirical estimates. And so often, particularly with infrasound, there is quite a bit of uncertainty. You can form formal confidence bounds, but these are really just the bounds of the original empirical fits. So there's much work left to be done there.
Thank you. Another question that was also raised more than once, perhaps it's a question to Esther. What was the most recent large fireball event? Actually, this question is in two parts, but maybe I first leave it with this first part. So what was the most recent large recorded fireball event?
Yeah, thank you for this question. So can I maybe have the slides from my presentation, the backup slides from 12?
Could go.
Because there was an event on Saturday that really, we were working on it during the conference, during the last days. It happened over the Caribbean, south of Puerto Rico. And this event we were looking for, it was a very interesting event. It was detected by different observational techniques. So we were analyzing data, we were asking for information during the last days of these conferences. And yeah, it was detected before it enters our atmosphere by ground-based telescopes. So there was a impact possibility. This was the possible impact corridor before it enters our atmosphere. Then, during the impact, it was detected by a lightning mapper, the GLM on the GO-16 satellite. Then it was detected by infrasound. So we were asking for the data, we received the data, we analyzed it, and we could identify a signal of the fireball in 3 stations. So this is the work in progress. We only have preliminary results, but we ended up with the size of this asteroid from last Saturday over the Caribbean of about 4.5 meters. And this morning there was an update also by the JPL database that Peter just mentioned. They updated their webpage, they included this fireball, and here you can maybe see it, it's the yellow dot, and they published an energy of about 6 kiloton TNT, so it was really a huge impact. As you can see here, the sizes of the dots display the amount of energy that was located there. And yeah, here you have Chelyabinsk. Yeah, and the yellow one from Saturday was really a large impact. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. So the second part of this question is quite related. It says, do we have good coverage of infrasound stations to monitor near-Earth objects in Latin America and the Caribbean region? So perhaps, Esther, you could also just give your opinion. Do you think we have a good enough coverage of infrasound stations in this area?
I would say it's quite good. We are happy that they are there. Sure, there can be more. It's always possible to make everything better, but for us, as you can see for this example, there was a fireball and there were a lot of infrasound stations around, and it could be detected by 3 stations. So yeah, it depends always on where exactly the fireball event happened, what's the weather conditions, what's the season of the year, and also on the quality on the different stations. So yeah.
I think Romana perhaps could add something on the level of international cooperation.
Yeah, actually, this region is also quite poorly covered if we look at the International Asteroid Warning Network. As I showed the slide earlier, it at present has 15 signatories to its statement of intent, and we have none from Latin American and Caribbean region. So that region is still poorly covered in terms of telescopes or providing information or feeding information into the IO1 for observing near-Earth objects.
Okay, I see we have quite a few more questions. Maybe I think we take 2 more online, and then we ask others here to raise their questions with a microphone. I mean, one question perhaps which I can try to answer is how real is the representation of destroying a huge asteroid flying towards Earth depicted in the movie Armageddon? Of course, these movies, Armageddon and Deep Impact, we have watched all many, many times, and I must say it is not very realistic. They use atomic weapons to destroy or split these asteroids. Using a nuclear device is one of the methods assessed for deflecting an asteroid, but one would do it at a safe distance specifically to avoid it to break up, because it might then produce many, many fragments and the damage could be larger than it would be without trying this. So I would say there are many aspects which are realistic, the way these objects are discovered, that you can calculate the impact risk, that one can try to do something, but blowing it up in space, that is a bit, I would say, a Hollywood scheme, which is not a method that we would envisage. Maybe one more question that we could raise here. Is there any relation between the location, meaning longitude and latitude, in Earth and the frequency seen in meteors? Perhaps a question to Peter Brown, and then also to Esther, if you want to add. Peter, please.
Sure. So in terms of large impacts, the distribution around the globe is largely uniform. We don't have any specialized one area over another. There's a slight decrease just because of geometry in the larger impacts towards the poles, but it's of order 10% decrease in number. For the smaller meteors, there's a temporal variability that has to do with the time of the day. There tends to be more visible meteors that happen in the early morning hours, and that has to do just more with orbital geometry. But that's not the sort of thing we see with the airbursts. The airbursts are much more uniform. We don't really see a strong latitude-longitude clustering.
And Esther, do you want to add something? Do you have experience with the distribution?
Yeah, we are biased towards the countries which use the social media platforms for which we are using. So our alert system is mainly based on Twitter and on the Google Alert system. So sure, we have a lot of firewalls detected over America. We have a lot of events over Europe and also over Russia because they put their dashcam videos online on YouTube. So we have a huge bias because it's still work in progress. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I just learned that perhaps on the previous question on this Armageddon scenario, perhaps Romana could provide some additional comments. I mean, she mentioned in her overview there was a legal working group to assess legal questions that might arise during a mitigation mission. And perhaps you could comment on this scenario, Romana.
Yes. Indeed, because there are several questions still, let's say, sensitive or require further clarification when we look at the international legal regime for outer space activities and the Armageddon scenario. First of all, Outer Space Treaty prohibits placing nuclear devices in outer space. I mean, it's true that the Committee on the Peaceful Use of Outer Space have developed guidelines, non-binding voluntary guidelines for using nuclear power sources for deep space missions. So there's certain security and transparency provided in that regard. But when it comes to planetary defense and mitigation missions that would include a nuclear device, that would obviously, the legal group concluded that it's a very sensitive issue. If there's a global threat to human security posed by a nearest object, obviously the Security Council has the authority to discuss such an issue. And it would also be a decision-making authority probably in that respect. But as I said, at the moment, it's not an agreed protocol of who actually would be a decision-making authority. There are also some other liability questions, even when using other methods for deflection of a nearest object. For example, kinetic impactor, when you nudge it. What if you nudge it and it's ending up, affecting some other part of Earth? So all these questions would have to be put forward in case there's a real threat. And basically, I think at that time, such a protocol would have to be negotiated based on the information we would have by ION on, how large is the object, what's the trajectory, and then based on the advice the Space Mission Planning Advisory Group gives to international community on possible mitigation options.
Thank you. So things are not so easy. And we have more online questions, but perhaps we should take now the opportunity to give a chance to those in the audience who are not using the app to raise some questions. Please use the microphone so that everyone can hear the questions. I see yes, please.
Thank you. Pierce Gordon from the United States. Of course, there's another legal prohibition against using a nuclear explosive in outer space, and that's the agreement that this conference is related to, the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty. It prohibits nuclear explosions anywhere. So you would need to envision some sort of a legal out to deal with not carrying out a nuclear explosion. But it's of also great interest that the infrasound monitoring system, which was used early to detect nuclear explosions in the course of the development of nuclear weapons with atmospheric testing and then it fell out of use because the big states began to use satellites to monitor the atmosphere. And it was only in the negotiation of the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty that in order to provide capabilities globally to states that did not have outer space based monitoring platforms, satellites, that the infrasound network was added to the 4 technologies that are used in the Test Ban Treaty international monitoring system. And it's quite interesting that that data from infrasound is now being used in this objective of dealing with near-Earth objects and their possible impact on Earth. From my perspective, the most important thing that the space community could do would be to extend the detection capability as far as feasible and to as low a diameter object as possible to obviate this notion of resorting to the use of a nuclear explosive to, as you said, deflect the satellite, but you always run the risk of the object, but you run the risk that it will break up and cause a lot of trouble.
Thank you. I mean, we fully agree, and as was mentioned by the NEMO presentation, we are trying to use all available means to collect information on these bolides and fireballs. I think Romana can add a comment.
Yes, and exactly, and that is why the cooperation between the Outer Space Office and the CTBTO is so important in this regard, and we really would like to move this forward, as you've mentioned correctly. So we have the observation and detection database as complete as possible. Thank you.
Are there other questions in the audience here? Or comments? Yes, please.
Thank you. Ricardo Mena from the UN Office of Disaster Risk Reduction. Actually, I have 2 questions. One is, what about other outer space issues like solar flares and the potential impact on Earth, particularly bearing in mind the networks of interconnectedness that currently exist and what disruptions they may cause? And then related to what Romana was saying, indeed the SnT framework does not take into account outer space hazards. It expanded its scope to not only look for natural hazard events but also man-made. I suppose that the next stage will be to include all potential hazards and risks that should be taken into account. And this is an approach, by the way, that we are already using, particularly when working on the risk assessment frameworks that we invite, all member states to think about risk in a systemic way, considering all possibilities. So that doesn't preclude potentially this type of events.
Yes, I mean, I can only fully agree with you, but actually on some, let's say, solar eruptions and some of those events, those are covered by the space weather community. And they have very similar setups, and this is already addressed also at international level, and it goes very much along the same lines. I mean, here we were just dealing with NEOs and planetary defense, but that risk is also well recognized. Perhaps Romana want to add some comments.
Yeah, so space weather is an agenda item of the committee, Scientific and Technical Subcommittee, and we have an expert group on space weather. It's actually chaired by Canada, really dedicated to, that looks at the best examples also from the NEO community. Obviously, the activity or the detection time for NEOs is much, it's much longer than for space weather. There you have to have more of a 24/7 kind of emergency response. But yes, the expert group is actually looking at bringing together all the other entities like COSPAR that already have a roadmap for in this area, and see whether we can actually have all these actors together under one international mechanism for space weather as well. So it's an ongoing work. Yeah.
Are there other questions from the audience here which are not yet online? We have more questions online. I don't see any raised hands, so maybe we can come back to some of the online questions. There is one that was forwarded several times. Does the IMS have an automated infrasound bolide detection and reporting system? What is its typical reporting time? Maybe first Esther could try to answer it.
It's very difficult to separate between the sources of the infrasound signal. So if there is a bulletin, then it's not known if it was a fireball. So for our cases, we have information from different sources, mainly from Twitter, sometimes also from camera networks. We know that there was a fireball, and then we are asking for the data. So this is the way how it works for our project, but this would be very cool to get information about a fireball detection in the IMS. But I think maybe you add something.
Maybe Peter could add some comments.
Yeah, so there doesn't exist any automated infrasound bolide detection at the present time. Obviously, you can run various detectors from the infrasound and do correlations. You can find sources. But then determining whether those sources are mining blasts or rocket launches or bolides usually requires some other additional information. So at the moment it's an aspirational sort of thing, but it certainly doesn't exist in practice.
Thank you. Maybe one other question also to Peter perhaps. Do the fireballs produce electromagnetic pulse? And what other technologies, in addition to infrasound, can be used to detect them?
So yeah, those are good questions. In general, we are pretty confident. Even very large fireballs don't produce EMPs. The physics that produces EMPs is not present in fireballs. But there are some people who speculate there may be some exotic plasma processes that do occur that could produce weak EMPs, not the sort of EMPs you'd worry about from a nuclear weapons standpoint, but something where you might be able to detect the fireball. The other part about the technologies, certainly seismic can detect airways from fireballs if there's coupling. As far as I know, hydroacoustic has never detected fireballs directly or indirectly. And radionuclide also, as far as I know, there's never been any radionuclide detection of a fireball.
Maybe one other question to Romana. How many member states are in the UN Outer Space Science Area, and what is required for a state to become a member?
Yeah, thank you. Yes, so the Committee on the Peaceful Use of Outer Space has now witnessed increasing growth. So from last couple of years, from 70 member states, we now have 92 member states. The committee has no rules of procedure in terms of what is required for a state to become a member. It is sort of implicit that a state would accede to at least the Outer Space Treaty, which is sort of the Magna Carta of international space law. Yeah, the committee is very welcoming because in itself, it represents a very important transparency and confidence-building mechanisms where member states share information on their space activities, on the new technologies. So it's a rather uncomplex way of becoming a member. So state has to indicate that, obviously, through a note verbal to our office, and then the Secretariat provides the necessary information.
So one other question that was raised, perhaps or clearly to Esther in this case, so how many social media alerts do you receive typically, and are they all real?
No, they are not all real. We receive about half the alerts to be wrong detections. So I think a day we receive about maybe 5 alerts, and half of them are wrong alerts. So this is still work in progress, so we have to take them together to different events, and often we receive more alerts to one fireball. For example, on Saturday there was a different fireball over Australia, And we got information about this fireball before we heard from the one that I just was talking about over the Caribbean, because the fireball in Australia was seen by people. There were witness reports. There was even a video that currently is on Twitter and is circulating and retweeted. So we are still receiving less alerts about this fireball, for example, but we are receiving. So we learned that it's not as difficult to know about the fireball events if they are happening during the daytime and over populated areas, sure. But it's very difficult to get aware of all the spam. So there's a whiskey called Fireball. There's a TV show called Meteor Garden. There's a festival that's called Meteoroid. And all of this stuff causes a lot of wrong alerts to us, and we have at the moment a long list, and this list is still growing with spam keywords. So our alerts are filtered and we're getting better and better, sure, but this will take still some time and it's not as easy as we expected at the beginning.
Thank you. Maybe one a bit sensitive question that was raised. Could your network and CTBT infrasound station be used also to detect ICBM or hypersonic vehicles? I mean, of course, we also have asked ourselves, for example, do you see re-entering objects of space debris, dead satellites? So what can be seen? Perhaps Peter, will you give it a first try, and maybe then Esther can also give her experience.
Sure, I think anything that produces impulsive release of energy in the atmosphere can potentially be detected. So you could imagine objects like that might be detected.
Yeah, please. Romana, you want to add something?
Yeah, well, in terms of connection with the register of objects launched into outer space, so member states inform the office on a scheduled re-entry of certain parts, of defunct parts of satellites. And then we always also ask our colleagues from CTBTO whether they have noticed that, you know, this was such a scheduled re-entry of such an object. So we're monitoring that too.
Yeah, if we have a fireball video, we always can make an estimation if it was a natural source or a re-entry, because these are very long-lasting, they are spectacular, there's a lot of fragmentation in these videos. And then we are also comparing with re-entry databases, and yeah, I also can imagine that it was detected with the infrasound, but we did not have a look for this.
Okay, maybe a short technical question that came up. What are the frequency bands that are needed to record, let's say, different atmospheric sources, like meteors, larger fireballs, etc.? So perhaps, Peter, could you say something about the frequency bands?
Sure. So in general, the dominant frequency is related to the energy of the fireball. So a 1 kiloton fireball typically has peak energy around a 5-second period. So if you're looking for kiloton class events and larger, you're looking for longer periods than typically 5 seconds. So that's often called the monitoring band, and people would look in that band at low frequencies. Unfortunately, that's also the band where microbaryons are present. So we have this unfortunate circumstance where often these fireballs, 1 or a few kilotons, can be masked or are competing with this ever-present microbarium noise, which is also at about the same period. Very big things like Chelyabinsk are at much longer periods, and there's less interference from background noise.
And perhaps we give the audience present here one more chance to raise a question with the microphone. Yes, please.
Thank you very much. Julien Vergos, France. So I was wondering if there are some impactors on the other planets, and if we were able to look at them.
Yes, a very good question. Please, perhaps Peter, you are the best person to answer.
Sure. So yes, all planets have impactors. Earth's not special. We see them everywhere. There have been impacts detected on Mars. There's actually a Mars mission there right now called InSight with a seismometer, and they're actually in the process of detecting airwaves from impacts as well as impacts themselves. We expect Venus also to have impactors. I don't think there have been direct detection from a infrasound or a wave standpoint there, but there have been optical detections. There have been impacts detected onto Jupiter. The moon, there are also objects that hit the moon and produce bright flashes. So this is a common interplanetary shooting gallery. They're hitting everything all the time, and it's one of the background noises that we have to deal with on Earth if we're going to look at explosions in the Earth's atmosphere.
Is there any other question? Yes, please. Or comments are welcome as well.
You mentioned the near-Earth objects as being potential risks, and they're being indexed and catalogued. Now there's also objects coming further out, like comets. What is the relative risk of both classes, near-Earth versus objects coming in from further out and which cannot be catalogued?
Maybe I can try to answer this question. So right now we know about 20,300 near-Earth objects, the way they were defined by Peter Brown. Of course, not all of them do cross the Earth's orbit and could impact Earth at any time. And out of those 20,300, there are about 860 in our risk list. That means for those 860, we cannot completely exclude the chance that they hit Earth within the next 100 years. That's about the time period we can propagate the orbit into the future. So 860 are in this risk list out of 20,300 known near-Earth objects. And most of the near-Earth objects we do not know yet. If we come to comets, there are about 108 near-Earth comets. Only those are counted with a period less than 200 years as near-Earth comets for some historical reasons. And none of them is on a collision course with Earth, so none of them can impact Earth of these known comets. So the risk from comets is much smaller than from asteroids. But on the other hand, comets could appear on a very short notice, and you might only see them 2 years or 1 or 2, 3 years before they actually could impact, and then it would be much too short to do anything. You would have no chance to launch a deflection mission. And in addition, they tend to be fairly large, kilometer size rather than just tens of meters or a few hundred meters like asteroids. And also their orbit is rather unpredictable because they have these jets, so it's much more difficult to predict them. So the risk, I would say, from comets is much, much smaller than from asteroids, but it does exist and it poses then a specific problem, yes. Is there any other question? I think we don't have much time left. We have some other online questions, but perhaps I would use the last few minutes to ask each of the panelists here to express their hope or wish or view in where could we be 10 years from now in this field of monitoring bolides, fireballs, near-Earth objects, and in mitigating a potential threat. I mean, we have heard from the background information, this is all work in progress and a lot has to be done. Most potentially threatening objects are not even known. So please, perhaps you could express your view, where will we be 10 years from now, Romana?
Yeah. Well, if I just go along with the mandate of our Office for Outer Space Affairs, I think what is really important is continue to sensitize member states or in general about this possibility of an impact and about the capabilities and the two entities that could provide a trusted source of information. To also link this to the disaster management community more, together with space weather, just to make them aware that this is a natural hazard. It's preventable, it's predictable, and there are capabilities to ensure that. So that would be sort of my projection into the future. As you said, work in progress.
And Peter?
Yeah, I think over the next 10 years we're going to see a revolution in terms of the number of small near-Earth objects that we're detecting, primarily because there's very new, very capable telescopic surveys coming online. One of them in particular, the Large Synoptic Survey Telescope, LSST, that really will completely change the number of objects that we see. It'll go up by probably an order of magnitude. And so that's going to change the rate at which we can retire risk by finding these smaller objects. So a lot of the smaller objects now would be hard to find with current surveys, except if we keep looking for decades. But something like LSST is really going to change the cadence at which that recovery happens. I'd say also fusing data from different systems. We talked about GLM, the lightning detector, telescopic detections prior to the atmosphere. All of these give us situational awareness of what's going on and having more of that available. So for example, having the infrasound data from the CTBTO in near real time would be a very useful thing to augment that situational awareness with other sensors. And I think over the next 10 years, we're going to see more and more of these events, like the one that Esther was talking about this past weekend, where we have many, many different systems that have seen it. It's great for science, but it's also really, really important to have a solid situational awareness. The public can be told confidently, you know, this was an impact, this was from an asteroid, we even know the orbit of the asteroid. And I think in the next 10 years, that's going to be a pretty common thing. Maybe once every year or two, we'll have an event like that with that sort of information pouring in.
And Esther?
Yeah, I would also say, I hope that there will be more information from a lot of different databases available in near real time, and that the public can be informed very fast that there was a fireball sighting, and as fast as they are asking what was this, there also could be information available. And if you can combine all information very fast, you also can give a first estimation about the size of the object, maybe also about the effects it had on Earth, publicly available. And yeah, I hope that there will be a lot of collaborations around the world, worldwide. Yeah.
Thank you. So we hope for the best for the coming years. I would say before we conclude, I see perhaps we could answer two very short final questions. One is, where do asteroids come from? This is relatively easy to answer. They come from the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. So they have been there more or less since the formation of the solar system. But they do not go after each other like a train. I mean, they can collide and they can be kicked a little bit around, and then they can enter certain regions where there is a resonance with Jupiter mainly, and then Jupiter can throw them out of the asteroid belt into the inner solar system, and then they come close to Earth. So the asteroid belt is really the source of the asteroid. And maybe the last question, can we see climate change through the flux of meteors? Of course, it's a tricky question. My personal opinion is obviously meteors which ablate in the upper atmosphere, most vaporize there, they have some effect on the upper atmosphere. Right this time of year, you can see so-called noctilucent clouds. So it's after darkness, you can see them. They are very high at 70, 80 kilometers altitude, and they are believed to be caused by ice crystals who condensed on little vapor coming from meteors. But this is a steady flux. There is no change in the meteor flux as far as we can tell. So they have some effect, but I would not think there is any change that can be attributed to meteors. Or do you have a different opinion, Peter?
So I would say, well, I certainly don't think meteors are directly contributing to climate change, but there's a couple of different ways that we can use meteors to tell us about changes going on in the upper atmosphere that may be related to climate change. One is, as the atmosphere changes, in terms of the scale height in the atmosphere, the detectability of meteors change. So over time, it looks like the flux increases or decreases, but as Gerhard says, you know, the input from the top is basically constant. But another more subtle way is, in fact, meteors are one of the few phenomena that occur in the middle atmosphere at around 82 kilometers altitude. And you can use radar systems in particular to look at the meteors and infer the temperature in that mesopause. And it turns out that mesopause, that layer in the atmosphere, is one of the most sensitive to climate change. It's expected to show the greatest change in temperature as climate change happens lower down. And in fact, with long-term monitoring of the mesosphere with these meteor radars, we do see temperature changes that are consistent with climate change models. So it's sort of the canary in the coal mine. We're seeing temperatures in the upper atmosphere that are being inferred from measurements being made by meteors that are telling us something about climate change.
I think we have to stop here. The time has run out. I would like to apologize for those who have forwarded a question which we could not answer anymore. Perhaps you could contact one of the panelists during the next break to get an answer to your question. And then I would like to conclude by thanking again the panelists and also all the audience for the interesting questions they raised. Okay, I was switched off. Thank you for your attention, and I hope you found it a bit interesting. And watch out for falling meteors.